Greetings everyone, Slizzle466 here, and in today's video, we're looking at some of the best wild decks to ladder with for the month of November 2020. First up, we have Aggro Druid. It's the deck everyone has learned to live with. It's incredibly aggressive. It refills with Voracious Reader, and with Embiggen and Pirates, you can just have ridiculous boards that are not easy to deal with for a lot of classes, and you can cheese out a lot of free wins. Next up we have Malygos Druid. So if you want to play a bit of a slower build of Druid, this build draws with Juicy Psychomelon to draw into its late game, and then you basically want to do a combo of Aviana, Kuhn, Malygos, Sathravar, play a couple spells, kill your opponent. Moving on to Mage, we have a Secret Mage list that hit top 5 legend in China. I personally really like the 2/1 Thieves in this list. I'm also a big fan of not having duplicate in the list, because sometimes the duplicate can cause you problems if you get something bad off your portal, or maybe your opponent polymorphs something. So I really like this specific build. You'll also notice that there's no Polkelt in here. This list is opting to use Stargazer Luna instead. If you'd rather run Polkelt, you could make a swap out there. Reno Mage, so this is a list by Getmeowth. It's a Luna's Pocket Galaxy list, but it's not too greedy. You'll notice that the top end is quite light. Though it's not all about cheesing out really cheap 1-mana minions. It's about getting really big value with your 1-mana minions through, say, Zolas and Brands and Baristas, things like that. It's also quite an anti-aggro list. You'll see there's Explosive Sheep, Doomsayer, Volcanic Potion in there to help you through the early game. And the last mage to look at is Quest Mage. You'll notice that there is an Evocation in here. So Evocation is still good at 2 mana. Getting it discounted just down to 1 makes it still really good. Those discounted spells are still very powerful. There's a Stargazer Luna in here for draw. If you don't like Luna, you might want to run an Arcane Intellect. It's up to you. But it's a pretty solid list at this point, and I wouldn't venture too far away from builds like this. Looking at Paladin, we've only got one Paladin deck to look at. This is an odd Paladin list by Scary Cookie. It's pretty normal looking, nothing too special. I do really like the 1 owl. A lot of players don't expect the Ironbeak owl, so they might cheat out a Void Lord or throw down a big taunt, and you can catch them off guard with the owl. But otherwise, this list is also running pirates. Not too many pirates, but just to get a bit of an extra game push against other aggressive decks, it's just a solid list to climb with. Moving on to Priest, we have a Reno Priest list. There are lots of variants out there. This is one I found that I've been having some success with. Some text that you'll see in here, there's the Renew. Not everyone's running Renew these days. There's the Mana Feeder Panthera for some extra draw, which is nice. This list has a Gluttonous Ooze teched in. This is typically for the Q blocks and possibly Bomb Warriors, or just Alaneths maybe, but it's a nice tech. It's not necessary. If you're happy just using Zeph to remove weapons, that's perfectly fine. There's a Loatheb in there, which can help in the mirror, as well as against other spell-based decks such as Mage, but otherwise it's the Reno Priest that you've learnt to love or hate. Looking at Rogue, we have a Kingsbane Rogue. So this specific list is a more anti-aggro list, so that's why you see the ship's cannons in here to help deal with the board. I also think the inclusion of Voracious Reader is kind of an interesting one. Even though there's Secret Passage in the list, sometimes you can just really run into trouble with Kingsbane. You run out of gas, and Voracious Reader can help get around that problem. The other rogue list I'd suggest is the following odd rogue lists by MAME. This list, it's one of these kind of all-in on the weapon lists. So it's got the Toxin Blades, it's got the Cutting Class, it's got the Deadly Poisons. But I really like the tech of the 2 Beneath the Grounds here. especially with so much Reno Priest in the meta. I think maybe 2 is a bit too much, but just at least 1 you want to be running in your odd rogue list. Moving on to Shaman, we have Big Shaman. Again, there are quite a few different variations of Big Shaman. I specifically like this list because it's a little more greedier, which is nice against Reno Priest. So you'll see there's the double wild spores in here. There's also the Sphere of Sapience to help you just get a bit of a better draw at the beginning of the game, getting into your Ancestress Call, getting your Blooms or your Muckmorphers to cheat out stuff early. Looking at Even Shaman, again, lots of variants, but this is one that I've found to work pretty well. Some texts that you'll see in here are the Diligent Note Taker to help you get some extra totemic surges, maybe an extra crackle, something like that. It's got the classic 4-mana 7/7 in there, and because of this extra overload in the deck, you've also got the Vicina. You'll also notice that there is not just a Lurker below, but also the Stormbringer. So it's got a bit of a heavier late game than some other lists you might see, but this really helps against aggro, and this really helps against control. Moving on to Warlock, quite a lot of Warlock to look at. Starting off with another deck by Getmeow. This is his Cube Lock list. Some cards that I like in here, I really like the Animated Broomsticks. These can help you just to sometimes control board. In other cases, they can help you to be able to play your cube and pop it on the same turn. The Bad Luck Albatrosses, I think, are really important, especially against the Reno Priests. And keep in mind, when those birds get shuffled into your opponent's deck, it undoes the Porkhelt effect, which can be quite significant. Also, if your opponent is a silly goose and plays Porkhelt after they get birds in their deck, they're stuck with birds to draw in their late game. Reno Lock, this is a list that was brought to my attention by one of my supporters, Kingdom Dude. He hit legend with this list by Jack. So if you have a little spin through this list, it's got the Broomstick in there, which is becoming quite a staple in a lot of decks. It's running the Sir Finley Murgleton Grizzled Wizard combo to tech against decks like Reno Priest, Odd Paladin, Even Shaman. It's got the Gnome Feratu, which you can use to remove cards, and you can combine this with Bran as well as with Zola. I've got the Albatross for the anti-Reno tech. There's a Boom Pistol Bully in here, which is kind of a cute little inclusion as an alternative to a Loatheb. And of course, you've got your big late game Demon package. It's a nice solid Reno list to climb with if you're into Reno Warlock. Discard Warlock. I don't have a ton to say about this. It's just good, and this is a pretty optimized list. You just spam things out, draw a lot with your Hand of Guldans that you discard, and do a lot of damage. The Dark Glare is in there as a nice little tech. Sometimes you get value off it, sometimes you don't, and that's okay. The deck's not based around Dark Glare, but it's a nice inclusion, and it's a demon, so it gets discounted by the Kenrathar Even Luck. Speaking of Dark Glare, here's a list that Shia took to a quick top 10 legend early in the month. This is pretty much very similar to lists that we tend to see on the ladder. Some text to have a look at here would be the Cult Neophytes. This just helps you sometimes buy an extra turn in the early game as opposed to having to wait for the Loatheb in the mid game. But there's also some Defiles in there which can help because sometimes you might have a bit of a clunky start and you start to get overrun by your opponent, so that can help get around that. But otherwise, very powerful deck. Little tricky to pilot, but with enough practice, it's a very powerful deck, if not one of the best decks in the current wild meta. And finally, we look at Warrior. So we have a Pirate Warrior list here by King's Bounty. This is pretty close to the classic Pirate Warrior we're used to seeing. You'll notice there's the two Wrench Calibers in there for the Reno matchups. You've got the Corsair Cache, which is pretty standard now to draw the weapons. But otherwise, it's Pirate Warrior. It does a lot of face damage. If you run out of face damage, you make your opponent draw bombs, hopefully. Odd Warrior by Major Tom. So this is one of a few different variants of Odd Warrior that are floating around. I mean, it's Odd Warrior. I don't have a ton to say about it. It's not the most exciting deck in the world to play, but you will notice that this list is running the OTK combo. That OTK combo being the Soulbound Ashtongue, the Silas Darkmoon to give your opponent the Soulbound Ashtongue, and then you shield slam it to do a bunch of damage equal to your armor. You'd be surprised how the combo isn't actually that consistent to pull off, especially against Reno priests who are pinging you down with their Anduin hero power, but it is a cute little surprise, and it might make your opponent make some weird plays if they're trying to play around that OTK. And last but not least is Galakrond Warrior. So this is a really interesting list. It's kind of a hybrid Pirate Warrior, Galakrond Warrior, Bomb Warrior list. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. It's got the Broomstick in there for some board control. You've got your early game Pirate package, though this is opting to not run the cannons. We've got the Alexstrasza's Champion, which combos with the Scion of Ruin, which are dragons. You've got your Forge of Souls to tutor out your weapons. You've got your Clockwork Goblin to put additional bombs in addition to the Wrench Caliber. And then you've got your Galakrond late game. You'll also notice that this list is not running a Porkelt. I think that's okay because this list you're kind of drawing a little bit faster than usual with the Forge of Souls. You'll get to your Galakrond eventually. But otherwise, these are the decks that I'd recommend playing before the Madness at the Darkmoon Faire expansion hits. If you want to try out any of these decks for yourself, you'll find all the deck codes in the description below. And if you want to help support this channel, you can click the subscribe button, click that bell, and until next time, hope to see you again.